Ethan Whitmore believed he had life mastered. A millionaire in tailored suits, a glass mansion overlooking Chicago's skyline, and a son enrolled in the best prep school in the state. Everything ran on his terms. No surprises, no chaos, no emotion. Until one quiet afternoon, he looked out the window and saw something that shattered the order he'd spent years perfecting. His son, 12-year-old Mason, was dancing barefoot on the grass. And with him was Claire Bennett, the house cook, not playing, not joking. She was teaching him, with precision, with grace, with movements that spoke of something far beyond a kitchen. But what stunned Ethan wasn't the dance. It was the smile on Mason's face, a smile he hadn't seen since the funeral, a light he thought had gone out forever. And that's when the questions began. Who was this woman he barely noticed 6 months ago? Why was his emotionally distant son suddenly alive with joy? And what secret was Claire hiding behind those quiet eyes and poised steps? What Ethan didn't know was that this simple moment would unravel everything he thought he knew about family, grief, and the power of second chances. Stay with us, because what comes next will break your heart, then rebuild it. Ethan Whitmore wasn't a man who missed details. A self-made millionaire in Chicago, Ethan had built his empire on control. Every deal signed, every moment accounted for. His home ran with the same military precision. Alarms set, meals on schedule, and silence was golden. Emotions? Those were inefficient. Predictability was power. Until one afternoon, when a moment of unpredictability cracked everything. He was passing through the corridor that overlooked the back garden. His phone pressed to his ear, his mind focused on a board meeting, when something outside the glass stopped him cold. In the yard, spinning across the grass, was his 12-year-old son, Mason, and he wasn't alone. With him was Claire Bennett, the cook, hired 6 months ago, quiet, efficient, invisible, until now. Ethan blinked. His son was laughing. Actually laughing, bright, unguarded, and free. A sound Ethan hadn't heard since Mason's mother passed away 3 years ago. Since then, the boy had grown silent, tucked himself into corners and books, retreating from everything joyful. But now here he was, trying to dance. Awkward, unsure, yet alive. And Claire? Her movements were graceful. Every step was precise, like choreography from another world. This wasn't playful improvisation. This was training. Who was she? A cook? Or something else? Ethan stepped outside, his polished shoes crunching sharply on the gravel. The laughter died immediately. Mason froze. Claire turned slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, and met Ethan's cold gaze with a calm that only irritated him more. "What's going on?" Ethan's voice was controlled, flat. "We were practicing," Claire said simply. "Practicing what?" "Dancing." Ethan looked at Mason. "Since when?" Mason's voice dropped. "For a while," and then Claire added, "he had no one else to practice with." There was no apology in her tone, no deference, just truth. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't your job." "No, it isn't," she agreed. "Then why?" "Because he asked me." That answer should have ended it, but it didn't. It gnawed at Ethan. His instinct screamed, something here didn't fit. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan sat at his desk, digging into her background. Claire Bennett, 29. No criminal record, no red flags. But he kept digging, and finally he found it. A forgotten article buried in the archives of a performing arts magazine. Ballet prodigy Claire Bennett vanishes from the stage. He clicked. There she was, a younger version of the woman in his kitchen, poised in a white costume, center stage at the Paris Opera House, arms lifted in perfect form, eyes full of fire and certainty. She had been famous, a name rising in the ballet world, on the brink of something massive. Then she disappeared. No scandal, no explanation. Why would someone walk away from that kind of future? And why was she now making soup in his kitchen? The next morning, Ethan confronted her in the kitchen. No pleasantries. He placed his phone on the counter. The article lit up the screen. "Care to explain this?" For the first time, Claire looked unsettled. "You were searching for me?" she asked. "I don't like mysteries in my house," Ethan said. Claire placed the knife she was using on the cutting board and turned fully toward him. I was a dancer, a long time ago. You were a star, Ethan corrected. Her smile was bitter. A star that burned out before it could shine. What happened? She paused. A long one. Then, I lost everything. Her voice was softer, now raw. When I was 22, I was set to go on an international tour with my fiancé, Daniel. We trained together since childhood. Dance was our life, our dream. Ethan felt his stomach turn. The night before our biggest performance, he was hit by a car, died instantly. Silence settled like a heavy blanket. After that, I couldn't dance. I couldn't breathe in music. I walked away from it all. Ethan didn't speak. He couldn't. The grief in her voice was too familiar. And now, Claire said, I teach your son. He flinched, not because she said it as a challenge, but because it felt like one. Why break your silence for him? He asked. She hesitated, then looked him in the eye. Because he reminds me of me at that age, but without the smile. That line hit harder than he expected. Later that day, Mason stood nervously in the dining room. He clenched his fists, looked at his father, and said something that surprised them both. I want to compete in a dance tournament. Ethan stared at him, stunned. A tournament? This boy who couldn't look him in the eyes for months now stood upright, asking to face a stage? Why now? What changed? Or rather, who changed him? We'll pause the story here, but it's only just beginning. Let me ask you this. If you were in Ethan's place, would you let a stranger influence your child, even if they brought your child back to life? And what would you have done if you uncovered a buried past like Claire's? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us what country you're watching from. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, tap that heart. Ethan Whitmore didn't answer immediately. When Mason stood in front of him, voice steady but eyes uncertain, asking to compete in a dance tournament, something in Ethan froze, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of letting go. Fear of watching his son fail. Fear that this thing, whatever it was blossoming between Mason and Claire, was growing far beyond his control, and Ethan hated losing control. A dance tournament, he repeated slowly, as if the words had a strange taste in his mouth. Yes, Mason nodded. Claire's been helping me. She thinks I'm ready. Claire, again that name. Why did it feel like a thread pulling at something deep inside him? Ethan studied his son, the same boy who once stared at the floor whenever spoken to. But now, Mason stood taller, straighter, not defiant, but certain. When did you decide this? Ethan asked. Mason hesitated. A while ago. And just like that, Ethan realized how far behind he truly was. His son had already chosen a path. He just hadn't bothered to ask. After a long silence, Ethan finally nodded. Fine, but if you're doing this, we do it properly. No quitting, no excuses. Mason's face lit up. Thank you, Dad. Ethan didn't say it, but something inside him stirred. Pride and something else. Later that evening, he found Claire in the kitchen, chopping vegetables like nothing had changed. But everything had. You knew he'd ask me, Ethan said. I suspected, Claire replied without looking up. You really think he's ready? She paused, wiped her hands, then turned to him. He has the passion. That's something you can't teach. The discipline will come. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her. If we're doing this, you train him like you mean it. No soft encouragement, no coddling. Claire raised an eyebrow. I wasn't planning on going easy on him. The training began the next morning. It was intense, demanding, and nothing like what Mason had imagined. Gone was the soft, graceful Claire from the garden. In her place stood a focused, relentless mentor. Every step was dissected, every mistake corrected. Again, she'd say. Again, again. Mason stumbled. He sweated. He cried once, but only once. And through it all, Ethan watched, silent, unseen, but always there. He couldn't help but notice something was changing, not just in Mason, but in himself. Why did this matter so much to him now? Was it just about giving his son something he never had? Or was it something deeper, something he never dared name. Weeks passed, and as the tournament drew closer, the stakes felt higher. One night, Ethan sat with Mason at the dining table. The boy was barely touching his food, leg bouncing anxiously beneath the table. "What's on your mind?" Ethan asked. "There's a dancer in the competition," Mason said. "Tyler Monroe. He's won 2 years in a row." Ethan nodded. "And?" "He messaged me, said I didn't stand a chance." A long pause. "And do you believe him?" Ethan asked. Mason looked down. "I don't know." Ethan leaned forward, his voice lower. "People only try to tear you down when they already see you as a threat. If Tyler went out of his way to rattle you, it's because you've already gotten under his skin." Mason's eyes lifted. "You really think so?" "I know so." And for the first time, Mason smiled. Not out of relief, but determination. Then came the day of the tournament. Backstage buzzed with energy. Dancers warming up. Coaches whispering. Music echoing in the background like a heartbeat. Mason stood quietly, adjusting the straps on his shoes, his hands trembling. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," she said softly. "You've done the work. Now trust it." From a distance, Ethan watched. There was a bond between them now, teacher and student, yes, but also something else. A bridge between grief and purpose. He couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in. Had Claire given Mason something he never could? The announcer's voice echoed, "Now presenting Mason Whitmore." Mason stepped onto the stage. Lights. Silence. Pressure. What if he forgot the steps? What if he froze? What if Tyler had been right? Then through the blinding lights, he saw them, his father and Claire sitting in the front row. Ethan gave him a single solid nod. "Go." The music started, and Mason danced. He danced not for the judges, not even for the medal, but for himself, for his mother, for every night he'd locked himself away from the world. Every beat was a declaration. "I'm still here." The final move was the hardest, one he had failed repeatedly in training. But this time, he nailed it. Silence. Then, the room erupted in applause. Mason stood center stage, chest heaving, tears blurring his vision. But he stood tall. Did he win? We'll have to pause right here, for now. I know. The best part's just around the corner. But I promise you it's worth the wait. While we take a breath, let me ask you, if you were Mason, would you have stepped onto that stage knowing the odds were stacked against you? And what do you think Claire sees in Mason that Ethan couldn't? Let us know in the comments and tell us what country you're watching from. And if this story struck something in you, don't forget to like, hit that heart, and share the video with someone who needs a little courage today. The room fell silent as the final note faded into the rafters. Mason stood alone under the lights, his chest rising and falling, sweat beating down his forehead, but his eyes, they didn't waver. He had finished his routine, clean, strong, and with a passion no one could have rehearsed. For a heartbeat there was nothing, just stillness. Then the applause erupted, loud, sustained, real. Claire rose to her feet, hands clasped, her eyes shimmering. Ethan stood slowly, joining in, his claps firm, but his expression unreadable. Pride, yes, but also something deeper, something more personal. Had his son just shown him a side of courage he himself had long buried? Mason walked off stage and collapsed into Claire's arms backstage, not from exhaustion, but from release. I did it, he whispered. You didn't just dance, Claire said softly. You spoke. A few moments later, the results were announced. The first place trophy, as expected, went to Tyler Monroe, the reigning champion with razor-sharp technique. Mason didn't flinch. But then came the surprise. And now, the announcer said, we present a special award, the Artistic Expression Medal, honoring a dancer whose performance demonstrated not only technique, but emotional connection, storytelling, and heart. A pause. To Mason Whitmore. Gasps, cheers. Mason blinked. He stepped forward, stunned, as the medal was placed around his neck. It wasn't first place. It wasn't the biggest prize. But somehow, it meant more. He turned toward the audience, and this time, he saw his father not just clapping, but smiling. Really smiling. Not the kind he reserved for gala fundraisers or company wins. This was different. This was real. Later, as the crowd began to leave and the lights dimmed, Tyler Monroe approached Mason backstage. "Not bad," Tyler said, flipping his trophy in one hand. "You've got heart. Might be real competition next year." Mason gave a small, confident smile. "Next year, I'm winning." Tyler chuckled. "We'll see." Outside the theater, under the soft orange glow of the Chicago street lamps, Ethan and Claire waited. When Mason emerged, medal in hand, Ethan stepped forward and rested a hand on his shoulder. "How do you feel?" Mason thought for a long moment. "Proud." Ethan nodded. "Good. You should be." As they walked toward the car, something shifted in the air between them. Not just father and son, not just coach and student, but something more honest, more human. A few days later, Claire sat in the back garden, sipping tea and flipping through an old photo album she had unearthed from a storage box. The images showed her in her old life, center stage, arms extended, eyes burning with ambition. Ethan approached quietly. "I wanted to thank you," he said. Claire looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For bringing him back." She set the album down. "You brought him back too. You just didn't know it." They sat in silence for a beat. "Have you ever thought about dancing again?" Ethan asked. Claire gave a tired smile. "Not for me, not like before." "Then for others," he offered. "There's an entire wing in my foundation that supports the arts. We've never had someone lead a youth dance program." She looked at him carefully. "You want me to teach?" He shrugged. "You already are." The next week, Mason returned to practice. Not because he had a tournament to prepare for, but because now, dance was simply part of who he was. And Claire? She began teaching local kids from underserved schools using a space Ethan had renovated just for her. Mirrors, wooden floors, and wide windows that let in the light. As for Ethan, he started showing up more. Not just physically, but emotionally. At rehearsals, at dinner, in conversations that used to last seconds and now stretched into hours. One night, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, Mason looked at his father and asked, "Why did you let me do it?" Ethan paused, then answered, "Because I finally realized the point of being strong isn't to build walls. It's to open doors." Claire smiled across the table. And Mason? He danced every day, sometimes for himself, sometimes for his mother's memory, and sometimes for the boy he used to be, the one who thought he'd never find his voice, but now he had. Let me ask you this. If someone gave you a second chance at becoming who you truly are, would you take it even if it meant walking through pain first? And do you think healing always has to come through words? Or can movement speak louder? Now we'd love to hear what you think of this story. If it moved you, comment the number 3 below. If it felt just okay, type 2. And if it didn't quite hit for you, be honest, type 1. And most importantly, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. Please give this story a like, drop a heart if it touched something in you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things begin in silence.